Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, surrounded by the quiet comfort of a life you worked so hard to build, only to feel an icy shiver of emptiness? It is a strange modern sickness. We have more information, more technology, and more luxury than any generation in human history, yet we are arguably the most lost. We spend our decades chasing a horizon that always stays just out of reach, convinced that the next promotion, the next purchase, or the next milestone will finally be the one that fills the hollow space in our chests. But what if the map we've been using is upside down? What if the reason you feel so unmoored isn't because you haven't achieved enough, but because you are looking for meaning in the wrong dimensions? There is a profound secret hidden in the rhythmic tides of a small Japanese island, a philosophy captured in a single word that doesn't just promise a longer life, but a life that is actually worth living. Deep in the blue zones of Okinawa, time seems to behave differently. It doesn't feel like a resource to be spent or a deadline to be met, but like a canvas to be painted. Here you find the highest concentration of centenarians on the planet, people who are crossing the threshold of 100 years not with fragility, but with a vibrant, infectious joy. When researchers first arrived to study them, they expected to find a magical diet or a specific genetic quirk. Instead, they found something far more invisible and far more powerful. These people possess a psychological heartbeat that the Western world has almost entirely forgotten. While we are drowning in a sea of burnout and existential dread, they are waking up every morning with a clarity that borders on the divine. This isn't just about survival, it's about the resonance of the soul. For a long time, I lived exactly the way society told me to. I was a hunter of goals. I measured my worth by the thickness of my resume and the digits in my bank account. I thought that if I could just run fast enough, I would eventually arrive at a place called fulfillment. But even on my best days, there was a haunting quiet that followed me. It was that inexplicable feeling that despite doing everything right, something fundamental was missing. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an ancient Japanese perspective that the lights finally flickered on in the dark room of my life. But before we can understand what they know, we have to acknowledge the devastating reality of the world we've built. Statistically speaking, the vast majority of people on this planet are currently living in a state of quiet desperation. A staggering percentage of the global workforce feels no connection to the labor they perform for 8 hours a day. We have exchanged our time for survival, but in the process, we have sacrificed our vitality. We see the rates of anxiety and depression climbing every year, even as our lives become easier and more connected through screens. We have mastered the art of being busy, but we have failed the art of being present. We lost the thread because we started believing that purpose was something you win at the end of a long career, rather than something you breathe in every single day. When you first hear the term Ikigai, you might think of those colorful Venn diagrams that circulate on social media, the ones that tell you to find the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. It looks perfect, doesn't it? It's a neat little formula for a perfect life. But here is the brutal truth. That diagram is a Western invention. It was created by an entrepreneur, not a philosopher. In Japan, the true essence of this concept is much more subtle, much more grounded, and infinitely more beautiful. By trying to turn our purpose into a career-focused equation, we have once again tried to hack our way to happiness. But the soul cannot be hacked. In its true form, this philosophy isn't about grand ambitions or changing the world. It is about the reason to get out of bed. For an Okinawan elder, it might be the way the morning light hits their garden. It might be the specific weight of a tool in their hand or the way they prepare a meal for a neighbor. There is a story of a woman in her late 90s who spends every afternoon weaving traditional cloth. She isn't doing it for profit or for fame. She does it because the act of creation gives her a place in the fabric of the universe. She is contributing, she is useful, she is present. We have been taught to ignore the small things in favor of the monumental, but the Japanese know that life is nothing but a collection of small things. If you cannot find joy in the mundane, you will never find it in the extraordinary. This realization forced me to look at my own life through a different lens. I realized I was so focused on the big win that I was treating the present moment as an obstacle to be overcome. I was rushing through my mornings to get to work, rushing through my work to get home, and rushing through my evenings to get to sleep. I was living for a future that didn't exist. When I began to apply the authentic version of this wisdom, I stopped trying to find a dream job and started looking for dream moments. I found it in the steam rising from my tea. I found it in the 15 minutes I spent writing in a journal without a phone nearby. I found it in the way I listened to my partner after a long day. These weren't distractions from my life, they were the point of my life. But there is another layer to this mystery that we often overlook in our hyper-individualistic culture. The Japanese have a concept called Moai, a social support group that forms in childhood and lasts until the grave. These are people who share everything: their money, their food, their grief, and their triumphs. In the West, we celebrate the self-made person. We admire the one who stands alone on the mountaintop. But the science of longevity tells a different story. Loneliness is a physical toxin. It ages the heart and dims the mind. Those who live the longest are those who are woven into the lives of others. Your purpose is not something you find in a vacuum. It is something that is validated and nurtured through connection. We have created an artificial wall between work and life, and then we wonder why we feel so fragmented. We spend decades wishing for retirement, imagining a day when we can finally stop being productive. But look at the people who actually reach that finish line. Far too often, they begin to wither the moment they stop contributing. In the Japanese worldview, there is no word for retirement in the sense that we know it. You don't stop being you just because you hit a certain age. You continue to be a vessel of value until your final breath. Whether you are a mentor, a gardener, or a storyteller, your utility is your life force. When you stop being useful to your tribe, you lose the why that keeps your heart beating. This leads us to the most difficult part of the journey. The enemy of the soul is speed. We are a culture of the fast track. We want the results now, the success now, and the enlightenment now. But deep reflection, what the Japanese call Hansei, requires a slowing down that feels almost painful to a modern mind. It requires the courage to sit in a room with no distractions and ask yourself the terrifying questions. Who am I without my titles? What is the effect my life is having on the people around me? If I disappeared tomorrow, what warmth would be missing from the world? This is not about being perfect. It's about being genuine. It's about recognizing the mono-no-aware, the bittersweet beauty of the fact that nothing lasts. Because life is fleeting, every small act of care becomes a monumental victory. If you are feeling lost today, I want you to stop looking for a map. Stop looking for a formula or a diagram to tell you who you are. Instead, look at your own hands. Look at the small, invisible ways you make the world slightly better for someone else. Maybe your purpose is simply the way you make people feel safe. Maybe it's the meticulous care you put into your hobbies. Maybe it's the way you tend to your family. There is a quiet, revolutionary dignity in being ordinary with purpose. You don't have to be a legend to have a life of value. You just have to be awake. This philosophy isn't a destination you reach. It's the intentional way you walk the path. It's the realization that the light you've been searching for at the end of the tunnel is actually the lantern you've been carrying in your hand all along.